This is number 4287. Derek Prince speaks on the subject, Marriage, Home, and Family. This message is entitled, Husbands and Fathers, Part 1.
The theme for our sessions this evening is Husbands and Fathers. It will be divided into two one-hour sessions. The theme for the first session will be Husbands. The theme for the second session will be Fathers, but obviously these somewhat overlap. My own conviction is that there is no more important theme for the Church of Jesus Christ today than this theme of husbands and fathers. Dr. James Dobson, who's probably known by name to a good many of you, who is probably the foremost interpreter of family life in the United States today, who has a radio program on something like 400 stations, wrote to me a little while back and asked permission to quote something that I had said, and I very gladly gave him that permission. What I said was, the number one problem of the United States today is renegade males. I wouldn't necessarily say the same is true in other nations, but I'm inclined to think it is. Males who've reneged on their two primary responsibilities as husbands and fathers. One of the things that has encouraged me in this teaching is a prophecy that was given in a meeting that Ruth and I attended shortly after our marriage. I think it was in April 1979, if I remember rightly. The conference was on family life. But right in the middle of it, a young man came forward, unknown to me, I don't think I've ever met him, and he gave a very powerful prophecy, which was like God inserting his own item on the agenda of the conference. And in this prophecy, which I'll paraphrase and not give in detail, God said that up till now, all his actions against witchcraft were merely preliminary skirmishes. But at that point, in April 1979, he was going to make all-out war against witchcraft. And we understood that he was challenging us to enlist in his war. Not our war, but his war. And then he added this: the main reason why he is making war on witchcraft is because it has millions of men bound whom God needs in his end-time army. And since that time, we have seen in innumerable different situations and circumstances the clearest possible confirmation of this fact. So I'm dealing with a theme which is right at the heart of God, and as I've already said, one of the key issues for our time. I'm going to talk now about husbands, but in order to talk about husbands, I have to lay a foundation by talking about marriage, because it's only through marriage that a man becomes a husband. And unless we understand the basic biblical picture of marriage, a man cannot take his place as a husband. So I want to lay certain foundation truths concerning marriage. First of all, and most important, marriage is a covenant. There are two main passages in the Bible which teach this. A covenant is the most solemn and binding form of commitment that the Bible knows. And it's a principle in the Bible that no lasting relationship can be built without a covenant. The relationship of the believer to God is based on a covenant. The relationship of believers to one another is based on a covenant. And the relationship of husband to wife is based on a covenant. And those are the three most important permanent relationships open to human beings. In each of them, the covenant is basic. Proverbs chapter 2, verse 16. The theme is that if you listen to this teaching, it will deliver you from the immoral woman, from the seductress who flatters with her words, who forsakes the companion of her youth and forgets the covenant of her God. So that the woman who's unfaithful to her husband is forgetting, breaking the covenant that she made before God with that man. So even in the Old Testament, marriage is a covenant between a man and a woman made in the presence of God. And then right at the end of the Old Testament, the last book, the prophet Malachi, God is challenging and charging Israel with their failures and their delinquencies, in spite of the fact that they are a very religious people. And this is what the Lord says to them in Malachi chapter 2. And they're complaining that God doesn't answer their prayers. They say, we're praying all the time, we're always in the temple, and God, you don't answer our prayers. And God says, I'll tell you one or two reasons why I don't answer your prayers. And here's one of them. Malachi 2:13. This is the second thing you do. You cover the altar of the Lord with tears, with weeping and crying. So he does not regard the offering anymore, nor receive it with goodwill from your hands. He says, you can bring all the sacrifices you like, but I'm not going to receive them. You can cry and weep before me, but I'm not going to answer your prayers. Now, why does he say that? Yet you say, for what reason? Because the Lord has been witness between you and the wife of your youth, with whom you have dealt treacherously. Yet she is your companion and your wife by covenant. So God says to men who profess religion, doesn't matter how much you pray, how often you come to church, if you are not faithful to your covenant commitment to your wife, I won't listen to your prayers. I will not pay any attention to you. And he declares that such men are covenant breakers. So you see, both for the woman and for the man, unfaithfulness to the marriage commitment is the breaking of a covenant. That's why adultery is so much more serious a sin than fornication. Fornication, not known in the Bible as premarital sex, fornication is immorality between two persons who are not married. It's immorality, it's sin, but it's not the breaking of a covenant. But adultery is immorality which involves the breaking of a covenant. And that's why adultery is far more serious than fornication. Now, covenant is one of God's secrets. In Psalm 25, and verse 14, the Lord talks about his covenant and the kind of people that he will reveal his covenant to. No one can understand covenant in the biblical sense except by revelation. Only God can make us understand from the scriptures what covenant is. But in Psalm 25, verse 14, the psalmist says, the secret of the Lord is with those who fear him, and he will show them his covenant. So God's covenant is his secret, but he reveals it to whom? To those who fear him. It's the God-fearing that can apprehend and enter into covenant. And then in Ephesians 5:32, Paul, talking about marriage and making it parallel to the relationship between Christ and the church, says this. This, that's marriage, is a great mystery. Now, a mystery in the language of the New Testament was not something that could never be known, because in those days they had what they called mystery religions. Religions which offered certain secrets to people who were initiated into them. But if you were not initiated, you couldn't know the secrets. So marriage is a secret that you can only know when you're initiated into it. And God initiates those who are God-fearing. I'd like to say to those of you who are not married, if there are any here, you can read all the books and listen to all the tapes, but there's something you'll never know about marriage till you get married. It really is a mystery. It's a good mystery. All right, now let's study briefly the principles of covenant that apply to all the covenants in the Bible. Psalm 50 and verse 5. Psalm 50, we have to read verse 4 as well. This is God speaking to the world, to the earth. And it says, He, the Lord, shall call to the heavens from above, and to the earth that he may judge his people. And then he says this, gather my saints together to me, those who have made a covenant with me by sacrifice. So who are God's saints? His holy ones. The Hebrew word, incidentally, is Hasid. Probably quite a number of you have heard of Hasidic Judaism. It's taken from this. A Hasid is somebody who claims to be totally devoted to God. So whom does God call his Hasidim, his holy ones? What's the requirement? Those that have made a covenant with him on the basis of a sacrifice. No sacrifice, no covenant. Every covenant has to be based on a sacrifice. And the Hebrew word for making a covenant is not make, but cut. It suggests a sharp knife and the shedding of blood. And actually, if you follow through the teaching of covenant in the Bible, you'll find that there is no covenant without a sacrifice, and no sacrifice without shed blood. Every covenant demands that a life be laid down. In Hebrews 9, 16 and 17, the writer of Hebrews deals with this truth. Now, you have to know that there is one word in the Bible which is alternately translated covenant or testament. But it's the same word. So where you meet testament in the New Testament, which is the new covenant, you understand that? That's, incidentally, bear in mind that all God's revelation comes to us in the form of two covenants. The Old Covenant, the New Covenant. That shows you how important covenant is. But wherever you read testament in the New Testament, you've got to understand it is the word for covenant. See, for us, a testament is something that only comes into effect when a person dies, whereas we don't think in that way of a covenant. But what the writer of Hebrews says, a covenant is not in effect until there has been a death. A covenant is only made effective by a death. So this is what he says in Hebrews 9, 16 and 17. And there is at least one modern version that uses the word covenant. I don't remember which one it is. For where there is a covenant, there must also of necessity be the death of the one who makes the covenant. For a covenant is in force after men are dead, since it has no power at all while the one who makes the covenant lives. So when you make a covenant, you really are signing your own death warrant. See that? It's a very solemn affair. Now, we've already said that marriage is a covenant. So there has to be a sacrifice. For those of us who believe in the Lord Jesus Christ, the sacrifice has already been made. It's the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross. Turning back for a moment to the story of Abraham in Genesis chapter 15, we read that Abraham said to the Lord in verse 8, "How shall I know that I will inherit it?" That is, the land promised him. His question was, how shall I know? How did God answer him? He made a covenant with him. In other words, the final commitment of God in any area is a covenant. When God has made a covenant, there is nothing more he can do. He is totally committed. And we won't read the details, but in the making of this covenant, Abraham was instructed by God to do something which was a custom at that time in the Middle East, to offer certain animals as sacrifices, because without a sacrifice there can be no covenant. Then he slew the animals, cut the bodies in two pieces, placed the two pieces over against one another with a space in between. And then the accepted way to enter into covenant was that the two parties making covenant passed between the pieces of the sacrifices. So we see here that Abraham entered into a covenant with God. It always blesses me to think that Almighty God would have such a close relationship with a man. Abraham entered into a covenant with God by passing between the pieces of the sacrifice. And then it says at the end of the chapter, "And it came to pass when the sun went down and it was dark, that behold, there was a smoking oven and a burning torch that passed between those pieces." That was God himself entering into covenant with Abraham. God, the Holy Spirit, in the form of a burning torch, passed between the pieces. So God and Abraham, through that sacrifice, entered into covenant with one another. What does that mean, to pass through the sacrifice? It means that when you've passed through the sacrifice and you look at those dead bodies, you say, that death was my death. From now on, I die to myself and I live for the one with whom I am in covenant. So Abraham renounced his life to live in covenant with God, but bear in mind that God renounced his life to live in covenant with Abraham. Now, because they were in covenant with one another, each of them could lay claim to whatever the other owned. Do you understand? So later on the basis of this covenant, the Lord said to Abraham, "I want your son, Isaac, your only son, the one you love. Offer him as a sacrifice." And Abraham was a covenant keeper. He didn't argue. He didn't delay. "All right, God, here I am. I'll go to the place. I'll offer the sacrifice." Well, you know the story. Right at the last moment, when Abraham had his hand upraised to plunge the knife into the body of his son, the Lord spoke to him and said, "All right, Abraham, you don't need to do it. Now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your only son from me." That's covenant. But that's not the end of the story. Because about 2,000 years later, what happened? The Lord said, "You and your descendants need a sacrifice. There's only one person who can make that sacrifice. It's my son. You offered your son to me. Now I'm offering my son for you." And viewed in that light, you see, history is the outworking of God's covenants with his people. You cannot overemphasize the importance of covenant. Covenant is entered into through sacrifice, which is the laying down of a life. Now, apply this to marriage. When a man and a woman get married as Christians, they come through the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross. Each one of them says, as Paul said, "I have been crucified with Christ, nevertheless I live, yet not I, but Christ lives in me." So after they have passed through the sacrifice of Jesus, each one turns back and looks at that sacrifice. And the husband says, "When I came through that sacrifice, I died. I laid down my life. Now I live out my life in my mate. She's the expression of my life." And the wife does the same. "When I passed through that sacrifice, I died. I no longer live for myself. I'm living for the one with whom I am in covenant." Each laid down his life or her life for the other. That's the basis of Christian marriage. And that's the only basis on which marriage can truly succeed. You see? It's totally contrary to the attitude of people today. That's why so many marriages break up. Because most people today go into the marriage with the attitude, "What will I get out of this?" And it doesn't work. The biblical attitude is, "What will I give?" And that works. Now, I should probably pause and say, I'm certainly not an expert, but I have a good track record. I was married to my first wife, who's now with the Lord, for 30 years. And we together raised a family of 9 daughters, adopted daughters. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but it was happy, it was successful, and it was fruitful. And it was subjected to tremendous pressures. In the first 2 years, we lived through the fighting that brought the state of Israel into being. Twice in that period, we had to flee from our house in the middle of the night to save our lives. It was not an easy way to begin a wedding, a marriage. But we were together, and God used us, and we served Him, and God made us a blessing to many, many people. And then, after my first wife was taken home, 3 years later, I married my present wife, Ruth, whom you've seen here tonight. And we have now been married for just over 10 years, and our marriage has been outstandingly happy and successful. And through our marriage, God has birthed a ministry which is actually now reaching most of the earth with the Word of God. So, at least I'm not offering you a theory when I talk about marriage, you understand? There isn't such a thing as a perfect husband. There might be a perfect wife, I don't know. But what I'm saying is, I'm not just teaching theory. I've proved what I'm teaching in practice. It works. You look at the people that don't approach marriage that way, and what you look at is a series of disasters. No generation in human history has ever had so many unhappy, broken marriages and homes as our generation. And the reason is the wrong approach. What can I get rather than what can I give? You know what Jesus said? It is more blessed to what? To give than to receive. That's true in marriage. The one who gives is the one who's fully blessed. All right, now, what's the end purpose of God in marriage? Turning to Genesis 2, verse 24, let me point out to you that marriage was originated in the mind of God. Adam didn't think up marriage. He didn't even know about marriage. He didn't even know he needed a wife. The whole thing was planned by God. All the rules for it were laid down by God, and the end purpose of it was established by God. Marriage, according to the Bible, is totally divine in its origin. It's not a human social contract. It's a divine ordinance. And the purpose in it is unity. And again, we come to the same biblical fact. If you study the Bible, there's only one basis for unity between men and women, or men and men. And it is covenant. Without covenant, there is no real enduring unity. And so this is what God said about marriage in Genesis 2:24. Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. The purpose is unity. The old King James said, a man shall leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife. I like that. You see, the key to marriage is the two words, leave and cleave. And if you don't leave, you cannot cleave. If you're not willing to step out of your parental background and make a totally new start, that marriage won't work. Millions of marriages are spoiled by mothers-in-law and parents that want to control the couple and keep them under their thumb. And it never works. Parents, don't you meddle with your children's marriages, all right? Because you won't help. It may not be going well, but you'll make it worse. It's leave and then cleave. In many, many cultures, the real reason for homes that are not successful and marriages that don't really work is that the culture teaches that the man usually shall cleave to his father and mother. And there's a loyalty that stands between him and being loyal to his wife. I want to point out to you that marriage is not a matter of social customs or culture. There are lots of things that are, and the Bible makes room for them. But all the teaching about marriage and home in the Bible is based on two things: the eternal relationships in the Godhead between the Father and the Son, and the purpose of God in creation. And those never change. It doesn't matter what the culture is, what the nationality is, what the language is. God's purpose there does not change. You see, a lot of people have got the idea today that marriage is an experiment. That's totally wrong. It's a commitment. And you can't make an experiment of commitment, you understand? And when you make a commitment, the commitment you make releases the grace that you need. But if you don't make the commitment, you can't claim the grace. It's faith. But without faith, what? It's impossible to please God. See, there's no other basis but faith. It's a risk. Getting married is a real risk. I'll be honest with you. If you're not prepared to take a risk, you better stay unmarried. It's a faith risk. I'd like to say something else. This is not a rule for everybody, but never have I chosen my own wife. In each of my marriages, God showed me clearly, specifically, and supernaturally whom I was to marry. And I'm glad he did, because God knows I'm not a very good judge of character. I deal well in the abstract and the concepts, but when it comes to people, I'm easily fooled. But God didn't give me the opportunity to be fooled. He made the decision for me. I'll tell you something else which is purely personal. I've never been anywhere but Jerusalem for a wife. All right, now, let's consider what's implied in what I've been teaching. What I want to say, in essence, is this: the husband's success is seen in his wife. The wife's success is seen in her husband. I heard about an experienced minister once who was asked about a certain Christian. Is he a good Christian? And he replied, I don't know, I can't tell you yet, I haven't met his wife. That's a very wise answer. Let's look at just two statements. First of all, about the wife. In 1 Corinthians 11 and verse 7. Let's leave out the question of head covering for the next meeting, all right? Because it's somewhat, well, let's not even go into it. For a man indeed ought not to cover his head, since he is the image and glory of God. But woman is the glory of man, or the wife is the glory of the husband. You have to understand, in Greek, in Hebrew, in German, and various other languages, the same word means man and husband, and woman and wife. So you have to decide in English which is the appropriate translation, but it includes both. So the wife is the husband's glory. If you want to know, and this is a very searching statement, if you want to know whether I'm a successful husband, don't look at me, look at my wife. That's how you'll find out just how successful I am as a husband. And let me suggest to you one key word that a husband should produce in his wife is security. There are multitudes of insecure women today because there are multitudes of husbands that are not doing their job. Then look at the picture of the really successful woman by Bible standards. In Proverbs 31, you know that, the last half of the last chapter of Proverbs. She's not the president of a corporation. She's an extremely successful wife and mother. And let me say, I think it takes much more guts and character to be a successful wife and mother than it does to be the president of the largest corporation. It's a much harder job. If you look, we're not going to read this all, but it says, Who can find a virtuous woman? That's not a very good translation. In Hebrew, Eshet Chayil. Chayil means strength, success, power. Who can find a really successful woman? That's what it is. And then the writer of Proverbs says, her price is far above rubies. Husbands, why don't you earn some good marks by your wife and say amen to that? Her price is far above rubies. I didn't hear you. All right. A few amens. Okay. But it'll come back to you in blessing, believe me. You'll get something extra cooked for the supper next time. All right. Just want to point out that in this picture of the successful woman, it begins, it centers in, and it concludes with the husband. What's the evidence of her success? Primarily, her husband. Look at verse 11. The heart of her husband safely trusts her. Verse 23. Her husband is known in the gates when he sits among the elders of the land.